again, that world I was born into was a racist, sexist, polluted place that we've made enormous strides to get out from under some of those burdens. And I like to think that my work contributed in some small and some not so small ways to do that.
Hello, I'm your host, Aveline Clark, and this is the 6-Star Business Podcast, where we have conversations with amazing, incredible people all about what it takes to be 6-star, going beyond the status quo, doing things differently, and how they bring purpose, love, and impact into their businesses every day. I love this episode with Shel. He's just such a passionate lover of the earth, lover of people, business, and bringing them all together in this nice intersection of peace, harmony, collaboration. And that's what he lives and breathes. That's how he operates. It's what drives all the things he does. You know, when I asked him afterwards, so what do you think your genius is? Like, what is it that you do the best? You know, he said, I help people find their sweet spot where profitability meets environmental and social good. And that is exactly who he is. It's a great conversation. He's got a lot of interesting anecdotes, stories, a perspective that I've not heard yet on this podcast. And Corey, my co-host, and I had a great time talking with him. So enjoy this one with Shel Horowitz. Hello, here we are. It's another episode of 6-Star Business Podcast. I'm so excited about this today. First of all, welcome my co-host, Corey. How are you doing?
I'm fabulous, and I'm looking forward to our new guest and the amazing story he's going to tell us. So welcome, Shel.
Yeah,
thank you.
Welcome, Shel. So nice to have you here. We're in a cross-continent conversation today, and this is why I love technology. And normally Corey's in Germany, but he's in Australia at the moment. So we've got two continents represented. Let's get into this. I'm going to start off by asking you just a few questions so that we can get to know you better. And first of all, could you tell us where you are in the world?
I am in Hadley, Massachusetts, United States, which is 2 hours from Boston, 3.5 from New York, and long, many hours from you.
Thank you. It's so good to have you here. I thoroughly enjoyed meeting you for the first time recently, and I knew that having you on the podcast was going to be even just more delightful. So thanks for coming along. I would love to know from you, who do you serve and how do you serve them?
I look for the places where an organization can profit by developing products and services that hit the sweet spot that incorporates both profitability and environmental and social good. And that may sound a little vague in general, so I'll give you examples of companies that are doing this. For example, there's a number of companies, one in particular called D-Light, D.Light, that produce solar-powered LED lamps, and they sell them into places where either there's been no lamp or there's been kerosene, which is toxic, flammable, dangerous, smelly, expensive, and of course a fossil fuel with a big carbon footprint. So they sell these lamps on a time payment basis. So if customer was paying, say, $2 a month for kerosene before, they pay $2 a month to the lamp, and then 10 or 20 months later, they own the lamp. And this is working on so many levels because it's getting rid of the nasty kerosene, it's getting rid of the fire hazard, the fumes, it's providing better quality light. So maybe this family can start a sideline cottage industry, or the kids could get better grades in school and go on to better careers, jobs, of course, for the people who sell and service the units, and of course, a profit for the company. So that's kind of the model that I try to emulate in my consulting, but it's different for every single business or organization that comes through me, because it's not something that you can just scale it out cookie cutter. It's going to be very much an individual thing tailored to the strengths of that particular business and the people who are in it, as well as their customer networks, their supplier networks, and all the rest of it. So it's very exciting. And I've put a ton of information about this on my website, goingbeyondsustainability.com, and also in my 10th book, Guerrilla Marketing to Heal the World, which I co-authored with J. Conrad Levinson, who did the first 100 or so guerrilla marketing books. And it's just every day is fresh and interesting and exciting.
Wow. I listened to that and I'm just really in awe and excited to hear what you're doing for the world, for people, and finding efficiencies, but you're also innovating because, like you said, your approach is not cookie cutter. It's not like you've got this template that you then sell into every company. It's very unique to that business and also the market they serve. So you're looking for solutions that actually solve real problems and help people.
Yeah, things like hunger, poverty, racism, climate change, war, little things like that.
Just the small things.
And obviously, right. no one company is going to solve all those things with one product or service, but they'll chip away at it, and eventually you reach a critical mass and society changes. I think we're approaching that point in a number of areas, and it's a very exciting time to be doing this work.
How long have you been doing this?
Well, I started my business, oh my goodness, 42 years ago, but it didn't look anything like what it looks like now. And it evolved many times. And I'd say this evolution really started in 2000. In 1999, a developer announced that he was going to build 40 big luxury homes on the mountain next to the state park behind my house, which those of your listeners who are on video, I will show it. That is the state park, that mountain there. And then the next mountain over was where that housing project was going to be. And I was the one who said, no, I don't think you're going to do that. So I started this movement to save that mountain. And I thought if we were enough of a pain in the developer's project for a long enough time, that maybe after about 5 years, he would go away. Well, it only took 13 months. We won a near total victory in a very short time, just over a year. And that campaign, I have been both an organizer and a marketer for more than 50 years at this point, and I'm only 66. So I started kind of ridiculously young. And I was kind of looking at what we had done and what we had done right and what we could have done better after that campaign was over. And I realized that I had brought in pretty much everything I knew from the marketing world to win this organizing campaign. So then I started thinking, what can I bring from the organizing world, the social justice and environmental justice world, into the business community? So we won in very late 2000. And by 2002, I was really incorporating this into my speeches. By 2003, I had the first of 4 books I've done on this intersection of doing the right thing with being a successful business. And it's just grown since then. My thinking continues to evolve. And I find that the world is just, again, I know I used the word exciting already, but it's really fascinating how fast progress is happening. And yet there's this other strand of how other forces are trying to pull things in the wrong direction. So we now have the added component of trying to not only do the right thing, but put enough roadblocks in the people who are trying to completely destroy the earth we live on in the service of short-term greed to show them a better way. And one of the things I think that really sets me apart from a lot of people in the environmental business world is that I look at business as an ally. I see that if you show business that this is actually a success formula, then you have them on your side. And we see lots and lots of big companies are now understanding this, and that was not true when I started this work. But a few years ago, I went to something called the Responsible Business Summit, and the speakers were from companies like Coca-Cola, Danone, General Motors. I mean, companies that 40 years ago you would have never thought as socially conscious.
Before we get into this, I'd love to ask Shel, what do you like doing when you're not busy serving people? Something you like to do outside of this very important, colourful work?
Well, outside is a big part of it. I try to get outdoor time every day. I try to get 2 hours of exercise a day, and I like at least 1 hour of that to be outside. I have that beautiful mountain that you saw, and I get to hike on it. And we have lots of other good hiking here. I have a bicycle that I use. I actually like to do freeform rock and roll dancing. I am an addicted reader. Most years I have read like about 80 books since I started keeping track. Last year it was only 60 because I started doing cardio classes every other day with my wife, and during the time that I had been reading on my exercise bike. So I'm a person of many interests. I love going to live music. I love traveling to exotic places. I have been to close to 50 countries and all 50 US states. And I go there not just, see the sights and drink the beers, but I really look at how can that experience serve the people that I serve. So like I went to Iceland and I came back writing about how this country has basically gone completely renewable for anything that's not a vehicle. And this was back in 2011. By now they've probably done it for a fair amount of their vehicle fleet too. I went to Israel and Palestine and came back talking about the groups that were working for peace in that troubled land. So I'm always learning. I'm very excited. I'm going to Japan for a family wedding in August, and I've never been, and I'm sure that will be very exciting and very growthful. Be interesting to see, for one thing, how the legendary bullet train actually works. And also how you deal with the incredible crowd conditions, which I've been to India and China, which are both pretty crowded places. But in Japan, there's this filter of decorum on top of it that is not necessarily present in the other really crowded places I've been. So I'm going to be very curious to see what that's like.
That's exciting. I love your quest for adventure. And you sound busier than most people many years your junior. And you didn't mention your grandson.
It's true. I didn't mention my grandson, who is a joy in my life. I spend a lot of time, usually about 3 afternoons a week, with him. And my wife and I usually do it together, so we can't get too tired because we're there to spell each other. And he's a bundle of energy and just wicked responsive and smart. And it's been such a treasure to watch him grow these last few months.
Lovely. They're so precious. You know, they're the moments, right? The important things. You've already shared so much that our listeners would be going, wow, like you're creating opportunities. You're a force for good. You're finding ways to connect profitability and business into the world, you know, that the world's frontline issues and problems, really. And I'd love to go into this further. Now, I asked you how long you've been doing it, and you shared a little bit about the mountain, that story about how you helped save the mountain from the developer. What's been, have there been some pivotal sort of moments along your journey that's brought you to where you are today?
Yeah, there were quite a few. I'll share a couple of them. The first one was all the way back in 1969 when I was 12 years old, and I went to my first demonstration about the Vietnam War. And I was sitting there listening to the speeches, and one of the speakers said, "The Vietnam War is an undeclared war." And I had not known that. And I had been the good little student studying my social studies and learning about the 3 branches of American government and the checks and balances and how everything was designed to make sure that autocracy didn't happen. And that all came crashing down in that one comment. So then I started questioning absolutely everything and flirting with various alternatives to the system we had and learning more about, even back then, it was pretty clear to me that these movements were all related. You hear these days a lot about the synergies between climate justice and racial and economic justice and social justice. But I guess I saw those connections pretty early on. I had a very working class friend, an old communist from the 1940s, who used to take us to a lot of demonstrations, me and her 3 kids and one other kid in the neighborhood. And listening to her, I learned a lot about what it was like for working people. I was raised socially middle class and economically lower class, which is an interesting dynamic. A house full of books, always going to museums, but the museums were ones that didn't charge admission, concerts. So having the middle class cultural aspects, but also growing up in a family that really didn't have extra money. So, and then Adele was somebody who never had any money, never had the pretense of money, but she had really solid connections in the labor movement, in some of the non-mainstream political parties. And she also found time for art in her life. She sang in Pete Seeger's chorus. She was the one who introduced me to Malvina Reynolds and Leadbelly's music. So it was very exciting to have her as a mentor very early. So I didn't start going to demonstrations with her until after that day when I heard that speaker. But then I became friends first with her daughter, who was my age, and then with her. And that was a major influence. Skip forward a couple of years. In college, I did a research paper on the pros and cons of nuclear power. And I discovered very, very quickly that there aren't any pros and that the cons were far more serious than I thought. So I got into the safe energy movement and got arrested at a nuclear power plant construction site in 1977. And it turned out that that action was way more significant than we knew at the time. 1,414 of us were arrested, which is a pretty large number, especially for a state like New Hampshire, which is a very small rural state. They didn't actually have room for 1,400 people in their jail system. So they put us in National Guard armories and had these 17-year-old National Guard kids guarding us. And we had dialogues with them. We had a little university in there. People who knew more than other people in the room about something would share it. And it was just this amazing learning community. And we came out, and lo and behold, all over the U.S., movements very similar to the Clamshell Alliance, which was the group that I was in, had sprung up in every part of the country, the Sunflower Alliance and the Abalone Alliance. And they were all using the same nonviolent group processes that we were using, involving consensus. They were all very similar analyses about why nuclear power didn't work and what we can do instead, which was solar, wind, hydro, etc. So by doing this action, we created a national movement, and that's not all. Because of that national movement, I am convinced is the reason why when 3 Mile Island happened 2 years later, we heard about it. Whereas we had not heard about Browns Ferry in Alabama in 1975, Enrico Fermi in Michigan in 1966, and some other really serious nuclear accidents that had happened before this movement. And because of 3 Mile Island and the movie The China Syndrome, which was also influenced by us, I think, and these groups spreading up all over the country, that dream of stuffing nuclear power down everybody's throats all around the country didn't happen. They topped off in the United States at 104. Richard Nixon, who was president in the 1960s and 70s, he said we needed to have 1,000. So that was a real thing that we did, is we stopped that movement 1/10 of the way before that goal. So let's see. I guess going off to college and getting involved with the LGBT and women's communities there was an important step in my own personal understanding of different kinds of oppression, going to live in a social change community for 9 months, and then coming up here and learning how to function in a rural traditional New England culture after growing up in New York City and going to school in a radical campus in Ohio. So all of those prepped me for being able to step into that moment when this developer announced that plan and organized this brand new movement. And then from there, it just kept growing. I'm one of those people who thinks I will continue growing and learning until I can't open my eyes, can't breathe, and I'm underground. Basically, I am never going to be one of those people who said, I'm done.
I can tell that about you. It must feel really rewarding to see the journey, like in hindsight, and look at those pivotal moments and see how you've created some impact in others and the ripple effect of that. It must just fuel you in some way. Would that be right?
Absolutely. Yes. I get totally juiced when I'm talking, giving a speech, and I can see people kind of like, you can see the wheels turning and then thinking, oh, I never thought of it that way before. And yes, this possibility for change. And one of the things that I do, it's not in my TED Talk, I added it later, but my keynote speech is usually called Impossible is a Dare, and it's based on this wonderful quote from, of all people, Muhammad Ali. Impossible is just a big word thrown around by small men who find it easier to live in the world they've been given than to explore the possibility they have to change it. Sorry, the power they have to change it. My eyes just played a trick on me. Impossible is not a fact. It's an opinion. Impossible is not a declaration. It's a dare. Impossible is potential. Impossible is temporary. Impossible is nothing.
I love that.
So yeah, that anchored my TED Talk, and many of the speeches I've done since. And again, reading that, I would love to see every world leader having a copy of this book and having a copy of Paul Polman's book, Net Positive, and Paul Pollack's book on Business Solution to Poverty. And there's a reading list I would love to give every president and world leader in this world. And not all of them are books I've written, but some of them are.
Mm. Are you first and foremost an activist for change and a marketer second, or do you see them as intertwined?
They're completely intertwined. It's like braided hair.
Okay.
Everything I've ever done in social change has included my marketing skills, and everything I've ever done in marketing has included at least my social change analysis. And the things like looking beyond silos, looking for the intersections, that all comes from the social change side. Looking at the power of ordinary people. And this is something a lot of business owners, maybe they start their business with a great idea, but they don't necessarily have the skills to carry it out. And I talk about people like a seamstress named Rosa Parks, who was the quintessential fulcrum point for the civil rights movement at one time. And she was, incidentally, that was not a random act. She was a trained activist, and most people don't know that. But she seized the moment, and then a bunch of people, including Martin Luther King, spent a year supporting that movement. And so that was one kind of ordinary person. And going to Korea's continent, we have the example of a shipyard electrician in Poland, right next to his country of Germany, named Lech Walesa, who started the Solidarity movement, or was one of its leaders, and became Poland's president eventually. So, if a shipyard electrician and a seamstress can make earth-shattering changes, or in Aveline's hemisphere, there's the South African example of Nelson Mandela. Who would have thought that somebody serving a life sentence he wasn't a terrorist, but that was basically what he was convicted of, would become a superhero? And who would have thought that the ordinary people of Ireland and Northern Ireland could make a peace? That's, as somebody who's been involved in Israel-Palestine stuff for a long time, I keep focusing on those two examples of South Africa and Ireland, because I need to have hope that it's possible, and it looks very bad, especially with the new Israeli government.
There's a lot there. Shel, you've spent your life in service to the world and the problems that you see in the world, and constantly living, like you say, in hope that change is possible. And I believe change is possible because we see it. I mean, by virtue of this organism of the planet and life, we're always changing. It's about, I think, how can this change happen for good rather than separate and just be just change in a destructive way rather than a positive, constructive way. And I see you as a mechanism for assisting that constructive, positive change, which is really exciting, challenging. But yeah, like you said, why can't there be more Nelson Mandelas and Rosa Parks and the president of Pakistan? Poland. And why not Shell? I mean, the most powerful people, I believe, are those typically behind the scenes, the smaller person that's actually doing a lot of this work and organizing things. And sometimes they're the ones that matter the most. So the work you're doing is really important. And I just want to honor you for that and say thank you. Thank you for being you and for being courageous and brave.
It's really, really validating to have that said. And so thank you. And it's also, I really do believe that each of us has the power to be a change agent and that none of us can do it all. So we have to work together with others and we have to pick our movements and our battles. But it's totally possible. I mean, the enormous amount of change in my little tiny lifetime, a speck in geologic time, huge. I mean, when the things like the culture of sexism that I was born into, the culture of racism, those are things that are not okay anymore in most parts of society. There are the extremists, of course, and they're very loud and obnoxious, and they do things like try to overrun the Capitol of the United States, or to elect horrible governors in some states that are really trying to be little dictators. But they are the minority. Most people want to live a good life and to live in harmony with the other people around them and with the planet that they're on. And, in one of my other talks in Making Green Sexy, I talk about different kinds of markets for green products and services. And it might be worth sharing that little bit here. Please. Because you have the one extreme, you have the super committed, the deep greens, people like me who live and breathe this stuff, who will make all of their consumer choices based on how good is this for the planet and for the different groups of people and other creatures involved. And then you have what I call the lazy greens, people like my mother-in-law who buys the recycled toilet paper brand because she is in the supermarket and it is stocked on the shelves next to the Virgin Forest brands. So she will not go out of her way to make an impact, but if the impact is right there as a simple choice, she'll take it. And then you have the non-greens who have to be convinced of the value of what you're offering. And then even more, you have the anti-greens, the hostiles. And you can sell green products and services to the hostile ones. You just have to do it based on what's in it for them. So I'm not saying that this company is hostile to green. They're actually very proactively green. But if you think about what is the retailer that probably has the reputation more than any other retailer for being all about the bottom line, for being all about profitability. Here in the US, it's Walmart. And, if ever there was not a tree hugger company, it's Walmart. And yet, in all my years of consulting and speaking and writing on these issues, I will never do 1/100th of what Walmart has done to green supply chain, because basically they told their suppliers, if you want to sell in our shelves, you got to clean up your act. And they had very totally selfish reasons for it. They are actually, we have a huge supermarket chain that's all natural foods called Whole Foods in the United States. And Walmart sells more organic food than Whole Foods. And they sell it to working class people who don't go to Whole Foods. So they basically doubled the market. They sell, I don't know how many hundreds of thousands of low watt LED light bulbs, low flush toilets, and they're doing it to make money. And they've also slashed their own energy costs. They're redesigning their trucks, their buildings, and everything else to really take advantage of designing with the earth as opposed to it. And if Walmart can do it, then the hippie companies like Patagonia and Ben and Jerry's have it easy because their market is right there in line as the deep green market.
And of course, Walmart, like you say, I mean, they're one of the largest retailers. And in Australia, we have, I guess, we've got Target, Kmart, they're kind of similar to the Walmart. I mean, yeah, we've got Costco, but there's only a few Costco stores in Australia. But it's really that Target kind of big W brand. And I can see, just listening to what you're saying, how, I don't say easy, but influential it is for a company like Walmart to make that little switch and then impact a massive supply chain and the customers and so many other people. The ripple effect is huge because of the reach that they have.
And you mentioned Costco. That's actually a company that I love to talk about also. Their previous CEO in about 20 years ago, a man named Jim Senecal, was quite a visionary. Among other things, he took a salary that is by, large corporation standards, he was working for free. He was making something like $300,000 a year. And he was paying his workers at a time when Walmart and Sam's Club were paying like $8 an hour US. He was paying $17. And he was, if you've ever been in a Costco, people are going there to shop. I mean, it is crowded. And their prices are low and their quality is pretty good. And they had all these social innovations at the time. It's a lot of companies, a lot of really old companies started as social impact companies. Oddly enough, the chocolate industry is full of them. Cadbury in the whole British Commonwealth, Hershey over here in America. Those were started as social impact companies. They did amazing things for their workers in the 1850s, 1860s. Somewhere along the way, they lost their way. And now I actually eat quite a bit of chocolate, and all the chocolate I buy is fair trade and organic. And puts Hershey's out of the question. And I think Cadbury has a few that qualify, but their stuff is too sweet for me anyway. I like really dark chocolate. So I buy brands like Theo and Equal Exchange, and I'm getting my bars of somewhere between 70 and 100%. And but these are things we as individual consumers, we can choose not to buy from the companies that are exploiting others. We can choose not to buy from the companies that are not doing right by the earth. And you think you don't have any impact, but if you and your 10,000 best friends on Facebook all decide to do something at the same time, you have more impact than you think of. And speaking of Facebook, I should mention that I have a gratitude practice that's public, and I have done for more than 1,500 days. I have chronicled on Facebook what I'm grateful for that day.
And that really amazes me, Shel, because of how busy you are and what you do, that you have the time to sit down and write this daily gratitude piece and publish it on Facebook.
I make the time. I probably average an hour a day on it.
Wow.
And interestingly enough, it's built my community on Facebook. I have all these people paying attention to that who never paid anything else, any attention to any of the other things I did. But it's been a healing process for me. It forces me to go around my day looking for things to be grateful for, and then taking enough photos that I remember them. And, this interview will be in tonight's, which may not get posted till tomorrow morning because of some other things I need to get done today. But I think today is something like day 1530. I started it in March 2018. And also, writing is a skill that comes easily to me, and it's how I've made a big chunk of my living for many, many decades. And having that, so for me to write a gratitude journal is not as daunting maybe as for someone else who's not a writer to do that. I've written 10 books and thousands of articles and probably a couple thousand poems, and writing is just one of the things that I do. And I I look for joy in my life, and the gratitude journal helps me to find that. But I always did, even before I started doing that. And I look for ways to make other people's lives joyful. I'm always introducing people to other people I think they should know, or sending a clip into social media like, oh, look what this cool project is doing on the other side of the world. And then writing materials that will actually help people. So, for example, because you are listening to this call today, if you go to Going Beyond Sustainability, Going Beyond Sustainability, there we go, .com/freebies, you'll see a whole bunch of gifts. And the one that I want to highlight tonight is called 10 Success and Profitability Secrets for Businesses Looking to Do Social and Environmental Good. And it's both a real quick cheat sheet of the 10 points and then a few pages of going into some detail about them. But the whole thing's only, I think, 6 pages. And it's an easy read. And you get that along with a subscription to my newsletter that I've been publishing. Oh, my goodness. I started publishing my first e-zine in 1996, 97, somewhere around there. A long time ago.
You're a writer. You're experienced. That's very clear. Thank you for sharing that URL with your freebies, by the way, and we'll have that in the notes so people can go there and grab all your freebies and your gifts. Thank you. They sound awesome. I just want to touch on the joy and the gratitude. And so this is such a simple thing. But as you were talking, it became really clear that, everything that you're doing, it's not for your benefit, right? Right back from when you went to that first protest, the whole reason that you want to see change in the world is to create more joy. Would that be right?
Partially right. To create more joy, but also because I'm selfish, because I want a better world. And the way I see myself as getting to a better world is to helping to create it. Yeah. So I will not actually accept the condition that you put on it that I'm doing this as self-sacrifice, because it's not a sacrifice. It's work that I find great fulfillment in, and that I have been privileged to be in some movements where we actually won, which is not a privilege that every activist gets to have. I've been in plenty that didn't win. But what I do feel is winning is the overall tide. Again, that world I was born into was a racist, sexist, polluted place that we've made enormous strides to get out from under some of those burdens. And I like to think that my work contributed in some small and some not so small ways to do that. And I have, on the activist side, there are really 3 places I'm putting my energy right now. One is immigration justice in the U.S., which is still a nightmare even under Biden. The second is local electoral politics in my tiny little community of 5,000. And we have twice taken over the governing body of the town with people who are aligned with these ideas of change. And then the third one is back to what I was doing in the 1970s on safe energy and never really left. Well,
thank you for sharing that, because I was going to ask what is your passion at the moment? What are you focusing on? And
I'll never have just one. I'm not wired that way. I am a multipath. I don't call myself a generalist. I call myself a multi-specialist.
So of the 3 is Corey's blown away. He's taking notes, and he's going to come out with something soon. Of those 3 passions, Shel, which one are you focused on right now that's taking some of your energy and attention, that's got some movement and energy around it?
Well, today we just had our first in-person meeting after 3 years of only doing Zoom for our immigration justice group, which is called Jewish Activists for Immigration Justice of Western Massachusetts. And out of that meeting, we decided to revisit the mission statement that we wrote in 2019. And my wife actually just made a pass at summarizing all the things that came out of that meeting that we wanted to put in. And then I went through it and did an edit of that. So that's what I did about 2 hours before we had this call. But I really kind of juggle them all, because later in the week, I have a meeting of the Clamshell Alliance website committee that I'm on, which is bringing back a website that went dead when our webmaster died and took the passwords to the grave. So we lost that domain, and we put up a new domain, and we put up new content, and there's this wonderful statement that we've collaborated on about why nuclear power still makes absolutely no sense and what the alternatives are, and another piece of it about the history of the organization and the process innovations that we created, which I would say influenced heavily groups like Occupy movement and the Standing Rock movement. It's nice to see that our work from the 1970s is still relevant and is still influencing people. And this week, I don't have to do anything about electoral politics. We had our election. We're done with that for a while.
Very good. It's very exciting. And now I'd like to shift the topic a little bit, and because I'm thinking about the listeners, and most of our listeners, I guess, are small, maybe medium-sized business owners. They're entrepreneurs. Mm-hmm. For someone listening to this, thinking about, business for good, what can they take from this, or what can you advise them or give them as a way for them to even think about this? Like, what's in it for them if they haven't already thought about it? How can they take that first step to becoming more conscious or open and aware about this?
Okay, I love that question, and it's going to take a few minutes to give it its due. So for starters, you want to look at the low-hanging fruit. Where are the places where doing the right thing will actually cut your expenses, increase your profits? That's usually, there's a lot of that to find. And then if you want to go to the deeper stuff, then you can start funding out of the savings you've already created. So that's one thing. Another is to look at the benefits. The world is demanding this. Companies that are not addressing these issues are going to be left behind. Because if people have a choice between something that is the same quality and the same price, something that's going to make a difference in the world, or is going to continue the dangerous status quo, they're going to go with the one that makes the positive difference. And you see this in something even as commodified as ice cream. If you're in the super premium aisle of the supermarket and you can choose a brand that you know is doing good things with its money, like Ben & Jerry's, or one that is part of a big nasty conglomerate that is known for abusing its workers and polluting the area where its plants are, and passing a far greater percentage to high executives and far lower percentage to the workers, where are you going to put your $6 for that pint of ice cream? You see this in how Toyota got in early with the Prius. And lo and behold, this funky looking car with an electric motor became a status symbol, and all these wealthy people were buying Prii. And so there are a lot of advantages there. The other thing is, I normally give 15 minutes of free consultation to anybody who asks, but for Aveline's tribe, I'll make it 30. And that's enough to go pretty deep. We've been on this call for not much more than that, and we've covered a lot of ground. And so you can go to, I'm sure that Aveline will put the link to my scheduler in the show page. And so just mention that you were on this call, and you get a half an hour of my time for free, and we can look at what you have done in your business so far. Where are the strengths? Where are the adaptabilities? Where can this thing you've done with one goal or one process be twisted inside out to come out a little differently? Maybe it's a different audience or market, or maybe it's an extra step in the process, or maybe it's a new product entirely that you didn't think about, but that is really well within your wheelhouse. And again, it's bespoke. It's going to be different for every single one. And to me, that makes it fun because I've got enough ADHD that I don't want to do the same thing over and over and over. But for the companies, it's great because they get my brain for a half an hour. And then if they want to go deeper, my rates are quite affordable. And I just today, I was on a get to know you call, like the one that you and I had some weeks back. And he asked me, well, what's a good referral for you? So I told him a little bit about who I was looking to serve. And then I asked him the same question. And he was in a market that was basically disappearing because he's competing with the AI engine. And so I gave him like 5 minutes of consulting that I think is going to change his business around completely. Some of that was marketing points he can use to retain the existing customers and keep a presence in the industry he's in. And the other was how to take his skills into a different industry, a different sector. So whichever one of those he pursues, he's going to be very happy that he spent a half an hour on the phone with me.
Thank you so much, Shel. That is extremely generous. And I hope that, the listeners can see the value in that, because just listening to you, that the breadth of your experience across different industries and in different ways, and, understanding so many things, that you've got this ability to create connections between different industries, places, that many people just don't have that foresight. I can see that you look at things very broadly and clearly, and many people, and holistically, exactly. So you see the big picture, and it's a very rare skill. So tapping into your brain for that is huge.
Yeah, I keep in mind always that the drive-up window that we associate with fast food restaurants was actually, I used to think it was invented by banks, but actually there were laundry, dry cleaning services that got there even before the banks. So that kind of cross-pollination from one industry to a totally different industry. I'm thinking of some of the clients that I have served. I had a guy come to me for a marketing plan once for, he had two products. One was a social network for people who lived in green apartment buildings, and the other was a property management suite specifically aimed at managing green apartment buildings. And I told him he should franchise internationally. I scared him, I think. He was really only looking at his own local market in Vancouver, Canada. But I said, this is something you could really take anywhere. It's totally replicable, what you're doing. And he'd never thought about that. I had a conference center come to me locally, and it happened to be a conference center that in 3 or 4 incarnations previously had been really the birthplace of the safe energy movement in the United States. And for him, I said, let's make this hallowed ground. Let's attract the yoga teachers and the conference leaders for whom this would be such an honor to set foot on your property where these events happened. And that's not something that an AI engine can do.
No. Very, very true. Yeah. Shel,
I'll share one more example.
Go.
Strictly marketing. I had an ice cream company asked me to do some marketing work for them. One of the issues they were having is that they had a manufacturing problem. They couldn't use their regular packaging. So they did these generic packages, and I wrote a label for them that said, like our new labels, neither do we, and then explained why they couldn't use the regular ones, and just made it humorous and it was just, right there. It was the ideas. I'm very blessed that ideas come to me quickly. And one of the books that I intend to write if I ever retire, is called How to Find Your Next 10,000 How to Find Your Next 10,000 Ideas. And that's something, it was originally article ideas. Then I realized I got the idea that I could broaden it to many other kinds of ideas. And I have a research folder for that that's decades obsolete, and I'd have to really start it over from scratch. But the idea of doing that book is something I've never forgotten and may do eventually. I have probably research folders for 20 books I might write sometime.
So you've got how many books published now?
10 under my name, and then a couple that I've ghostwritten for clients. Yeah.
Right. Okay. And your latest one is the guerrilla marketing?
To heal the world. There are 100 and something guerrilla marketing. I did the 2 on social change and environment. This is the later and more current and better one.
Okay. So that's the one you recommend that our readers look at? Yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
And that is, of course, also at goingbeyondsustainability.com. There's a page for the book.
Okay.
And
All right.
Links to buy it from wherever you want to buy it or to get an autographed copy from me.
Thank you for that. Now, this is Six Star Business Podcast, and obviously we connected and we had such a great connection and fun time, and I invited you onto the podcast, and I'm really keen to know what it was that attracted you. Obviously, you wanted to see me again and hang out for an hour, but
yes,
what does and likewise, which is why I invited you. But what does Six Star mean to you when you hear the term Six Star Business?
Well, we always think about five-star being the excellence limit. So going beyond that, it's like dialing the volume knob to 11 instead of where it stops at 10. So you're going for the ephemeral and perhaps fickle 110% that if you think mathematically isn't possible, but if you think spiritually and holistically and conceptually, of course it's possible. We always can dig in deeper. It's well known that we only use a tiny fraction of our brains. So if you can use a slightly larger fraction, then you're exceeding the goals, and I think that's good. You have to do it in a way that honors your own personhood, your own health, your own growth, your own need to rest. And yes, even I do sleep 6 hours, 7 hours a night. And I do find all the nature walking I do very recharging, and playing with my grandkid very recharging. I do a lot of things, like the food I eat, which is, oh my goodness, I've been a vegetarian. This summer will make 50 years since I stopped eating. And most of the food I eat is organic and local as well. And quite a bit of it is grown either right here in our garden or 3 miles up the road at the community-supported agriculture farm that we're members of. And so we eat really well here. In fact, lately when I go to restaurants, I'm kind of disappointed. Like, I eat better at home.
Yeah.
And I'm a creative cook. And one thing I'm not good about is documenting that. I can't measure anything and cook it. It'll never come out. I just have to throw it in, taste it, and change it a little bit up. And but I have many outlets for creativity is what I'm trying to say. And again, it's sort of a well-rounded and holistic approach. I don't just do one thing. I had a friend who wrote a book called The Renaissance Soul, and it was for people like me, and I think you, who would just die if they could only do one thing. There are the Mozarts who they're born in diapers, they're writing music, and they're still writing music when they die. But there are the Ben Franklin, Buckminster Fuller, wild and crazy people who want to go in 100 different directions and will settle for 10 at a time. And it's a fun existence, I have to say. But it's challenging because like the tradition, one of the reasons that I've developed all my skills as a marketing heretic and my advice is so different from other people is I don't fit the boxes. If I tried to do things the traditional way and have my one product funnel and have my one industry, I would be bored. And I find it hard to be bored. If nothing else, there's always another great book to discover. But if I were doing that at work over and over again, the same thing for years, I would go nuts. So different people are wired differently. I'm very happy that there are people in the world who can devote their energies to one very focused thing. We need them. Sometimes they're the engineers who develop our products that we come up with and don't know how to make.
Yeah, absolutely. And I love your holistic approach to everything and what you said about the Six Star. Your answer to that, whilst it started, you talked about numbers, you then talked about the spiritual aspect and then that whole holistic approach, and that there's always more. And there is on so many levels. And I love your answer. It was very new. Like you said, you're different. Everyone's different. And I love asking the question because we always get different answers that
And it was totally unrehearsed. I did listen to one of your podcasts, and I knew on some subliminal level that question was going to be there, but I didn't give any of these questions any pre-thought.
Yeah. Perfect. That's what I love. I love that. What do you see as being one of the biggest barriers to people becoming six-star?
I think we are, all of us, facing limiting beliefs that were thrust upon us as children, and they're going to be different for every person. I have been fairly lucky in that most of mine seem to concentrate on either personal energy, which, in spite of as much as I do, there's a part of me that would like to beat myself up for not doing more, or about, I recognize that I do have money barriers. My way of dealing with that, rather than solving the money blocks, is to simply create non-material wealth. So for example, I travel more than most of my friends who make 10 times my income. But I know how to travel inexpensively and educationally and well. One of the things I do is I'm a member of 2 different homestay networks. So often when I'm in a foreign country, I'm staying in somebody's house and living as they live for a couple of days, and maybe exploring their city with them, or maybe getting recommendations on cool things I wouldn't have known from a guidebook to seek out, or from a website. But, you know, I wrote a long time ago, I wrote a book on having fun cheaply called The Penny Pinching Hedonist, or Hedonist, you might say. And it was a fun book to write, and it was a really fun book to research. And the research started probably 10 years before I knew I was going to write the book, because that's just how I was living my life. I had very little money, but I had a value of seeing live entertainment, of going to new places, of eating new foods and trying restaurants. So I found ways to do that cost little or nothing. And so I am able to maintain a lifestyle that looks on the surface like it's out of proportion for my income, but really it's perfectly aligned. It's just that I don't do things the way other people do them, and I treat everything as an adventure. And there it is. And I also, I'm lucky not to have expensive addictions like smoking or heavy consumption of alcohol. So that helps as well. Right. So I'm not as frugal as I was when I was writing that book in the 90s, but I recognize that I have the luxury now that I don't have to watch every penny. And I still usher concerts, get to see them for free. I've seen some very big names that way. Once in a while, I still work as press for an event like that. I'm attending something called the U.S. Book Show virtually. I could have gone down to New York, but it wasn't a good time for me to go in person. But I did one of their conferences for press a couple of years ago, and they liked what I did. So a few weeks ago, I got an email saying, "We have already given you a press comp for this conference. We hope you can show up." Like, okay. So different strategies like that. And I have, because I'm a marketer and I hang out with other marketers, I know a lot of people who are millionaires. And I actually think that I have a happier quality of life than many of them, even if not only do I not have a Lamborghini in my driveway, but I have a 2012 Honda Fit and a bicycle. But high status cars have never been important to me. A high status house is not important to me. I love where I live. I'm very privileged to live in a magnificent 260 some odd year old farmhouse that was built to last, and has a beautiful view in 4 directions, and cost me, when I bought it 25 years ago, only $153,000. So rather than buying the $600,000, the $1 million house, I just found a house that met my needs, that was in my price range. And yeah, we've certainly spent some money to upgrade it, but far less than to buy a house like that should have been.
Yeah. I love that, Shel. Thanks for sharing all those things. And I'm sure our listeners got great, joy out of hearing all the things that you do and how you live so fully without the high income, or, the high, I guess, desire for expensive things. Very, very interesting. Corey, have you got anything? You've been very quiet. I'm really keen to hear from you.
You rarely see me actually being that quiet and not asking any question, but this time I just leaned back and enjoyed the amazing story we just got told. So fascinated to what I found the most fascinating is your innate curiosity, literally, which is actually your key component, why you are so easily come up with solutions to problems, people are bothered with. And as you said, you're a multi-specialist, you're unify and connector of people, especially nowadays, very important, where people remind themselves that being in a community, being part of a community where it's all about collaboration, nurturing each other is so important than living on their own, being selfish. Not the understanding of you're selfish in the sense of I want to create a better world. Their selfishness is really very self-centric. And I'm admiring you for your various missions. And I encourage everybody just to listen into this podcast and hopefully also support you, in getting those movements to a critical mass so we can be a heard voice, out there.
Thank you. And I just, while you were talking, I flashed on something I read a couple months ago. I think it was in Evolution 2.0 by Perry Marshall. The idea of collaboration is not necessarily only a human thing, that other species collaborate both within members of their own species, but also with other species. There are symbiotic relationships that look on the surface like they might be parasite or predatory, but are actually collaborative. Trees are definitely a part of that. Trees and fungi are very closely connected. And then, of course, different animals get nutrition from the trees and then return that nutrition to the soil in the form of poop. And it's nature doesn't waste anything. And nature, there's this whole idea of survival of the fittest and competition, cutthroat and all that is really a human construct. And while, I'm a cat owner, I see what happens when you put a cat in a field that has lots of mice. It's not pretty. But I also see that the mice are nurturing probably an ecosystem by keeping smaller annoyances in check. And they're serving purposes that we probably don't fully understand. And it's just what a miracle it is, this planet that we live on. It's so finely constructed when you think that if you brought up a spider to human size, her web is strong enough to stop a moving jet plane. Think about that. So if you want to build a bridge, ask a spider how, because they know more than we do. This whole idea of biomimicry is a wonderful new science of the last 20, 30 years. It's looking at how has nature solved these problems and how can we model that? And it comes into all sorts of cool things like an adhesive that was modeled after the way geckos walk upside down on a ceiling.
And now the conversation is started. Like we could talk about this for another hour, honestly. The biomimicry is so exciting to me, and it's so interesting, right? Yes, but I love what you said about the collaboration piece as well. And yeah, so true, so true. And if anything, for me, I'm always looking at ways to look outside of my own little space. And that's, I think, what you've demonstrated today, Shel, how you do that. And you look outside of your own pond. You've got many ponds and you look holistically at the earth and all of the different systems that operate to learn things and create connections and see how we can learn from each other and therefore become better.
Yeah. And it ripples through, because what I learned about biomimicry influences the way that I think about individualized, bespoke approaches for different clients, because that's what biomimicry is. You have a system that's going to work really well in India where it's dry for 11 months and then torrential floods for 1 month. That system is not going to work in a place that's all desert or all rainforest. You need different solutions in those. You might even need different solutions for the same problem on different sides of the same tree.
Exactly. I love it. I love the way your mind works, and I really, really love your energy and your curiosity, Shel.
Thank you.
Brilliant. Thank you.
It has been great hanging out.
Yeah, absolutely. So as we come to a close, do you have any final tidbits or little piece of advice for our listeners? Any nuggets of wisdom?
I would say look for ways to follow your heart, but also look for the ways that are going to make those things practical. So you don't have to give up your dreams, but you may have to modify them a little bit to fit some constraints, at least temporarily. And over time, you may be able to overcome those constraints. That's one. Another would be, there are two kinds of change in the world. There's Kaizen, the gradual step-by-step improvement. And then there's the great leap forward. I actually did a newsletter on this a couple of months ago, that those are two different styles and neither is wrong and both are situational. In some situations, you're going to take the little tiny step, but then once you've gotten 3-4 steps down the road, you say, oh, now I can take the great leap. I needed those extra 8 inches that I didn't have before to be able to cross this chasm. So you're building groundwork for yourself, and then it may be another series of gradual evolutions for a while, and then another great leap. I'm thinking about smartphones, for example. Going from flip phones to smartphones was a great leap, but it was made possible by little incremental changes such as, oh, we can put a really terrible internet browser on this flip phone, and then somebody would get that and say, well, what? We made it a good internet experience. What would that be like? And now, if you think about it, with this little device, we are carrying the world's knowledge in our pockets. It's not all in our pocket, but we can access it. We have every library. It's out there. You can watch news programs from other countries. You can just what a change that is. And that's only one of many big innovations. When you add that in with things like 3D printing, and yes, AI is going to change our world, is already changing our world in good ways and not so good ways. And some of these other, and this thinking as organisms within a bioregion, as communities that can communicate and work together and share common goals when that's appropriate, and then draw apart and do their own thing when they're not. You probably didn't expect this long and complicated answer. I didn't expect to give it, but I should stop there.
Oh, Shel, thank you so much. Wow, there's a lot there. Very grateful.
We can always do chapter 2 of this podcast, so
yeah.
That's not a problem.
Yeah.
I've been a repeat podcast guest for a few programs. I like to do at least 6 months in between. But it's, it's amazing. I feel this call has really been energizing, and we've gone into areas that I don't normally talk about. There's no such thing as a standard podcast for me, but there's a general framework they usually follow, and this one is mostly out of that box, and that's fun for me.
Good.
And I like hearing myself going to new places, and I think you and I have we had it when we were talking without the camera. We just have a really good chemistry, and I think we really connect on some cellular level that's different.
Agree, totally. Yeah, I love it, and I'd love to have you back at some stage, Shel. I know there's some more specific topics I think we could go into that would really be beneficial for all our listeners. So for today, thank you so much. It has been an absolute honor and privilege, and thank you for your the gifts that you offered our listeners. Again, the links will be in the show notes below here that Shel has given us. And is there any final comments that you'd like to make, Shel?
Just that if you like what you heard today, you'll find tons of resources at goingbeyondsustainability.com, including that freebies page with the 10 success and profitability secrets and the half-an-hour consultation and all the rest of it. And just keep learning, keep doing. You need both. You need to absorb, and I am somebody who loves to absorb knowledge, but you also need to act.
Absolutely. Perfectly finished. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Welcome.